Hello and welcome to Wrestler Spotlight. I'm the Maritime Warrior, and if you followed me through my other projects, you might remember on Wrestling with the Bros a few years ago, myself and Joel, we talked about this strange little promotion from Argentina called Titanes en el Ring. Now that's going to be the topic of today's episode. Today's episode is going to be a little different, probably going to be the shortest episode I'm doing. So I'm just basically going to briefly look at the history of the promotion, who founded it, some of the characters, how it failed, and if there was any future for Titanes en el Ring. Martin Karadagian would start Titanes en el Ring in 1962 in Argentina. Martin would also be Titanes en el Ring's top star and their world heavyweight champion. Titanes en el Ring would be around in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s on television as well. If you think the WWF and WCW in 1995 with characters like TL Hopper, The Goon, Mantar, and the Dungeon of Doom was bad, they got nothing on Titanes en el Ring, who had some of the goofiest gimmicks in the history of professional wrestling. Here's a few of the goofy gimmicks in Titanes en el Ring. Before Doink the Clown, there was Pepino. Pepino the Clown might just be the first ever wrestling clown. Titanes en el Ring would also have a character called El Android. El Android was controlled by a mad scientist. The mad scientist would control El Android with a keyboard, sometimes outside the ring, sometimes inside the ring. He would be pushing the buttons on the keyboard to make El Android fight for him. El Android is also one of the creepier looking characters. He's supposed to be an android, but if you look at the costume, he looks like an alien. During his matches, when his opponents would hit him, sparks would fly out of El Android. Before Smoky Mountain Wrestling had Prince Karis, the wrestling mummy, there was La Momia in Titanes en el Ring. This one is very self-explanatory. It's a wrestling mummy. Titanes en el Ring also had a character called Genghis Khan, and that was a character based on Genghis Khan. Titanes en el Ring also had a character called El Hombre Vegetal. I can only guess this is a vegetable monster. Now you see what I mean when I say WWF and WCW 1995 has nothing on Titanes en el Ring. Another character that they had was El Leopardo, which is a wrestling leopard. Now, this is a man in a suit, not an actual leopard wrestling. And I could go on and on and on about characters. They had sea creatures, they had vampires, they had cavemen, they had superheroes, they had everything that they could think of, gangster characters, everything. Like I said earlier, Titanes en el Ring was around from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. In the late 80s, it would end, and unfortunately, in 1991, the founder of the company, Martin Karadagian, would sadly pass away. His legacy was being Titanes en el Ring's World Heavyweight Champion. Later on in the 1990s, Martin's daughter tried to relaunch Titanes en el Ring, but it would only last a few months before folding once again. In the late 2010s, early 2020s, Titanes en el Ring would return with some new goofy gimmicks and some old favorites like La Momia and El Android. Titanes en el Ring was never popular outside of Argentina, but for the better part of 3 decades, this was the wrestling territory in Argentina. You would never see Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Ric Flair style matches there. Matches would last no more than 4 or 5 minutes. It was all about the characters. It was all about good versus evil. And that's what the people of Argentina wanted to see. If you are interested in looking up Titanes en el Ring, you can find many videos on YouTube right now from the 70s and the 80s, some from the 90s too, and of course the new stuff in the late 2010s and early 2020s. And with that, that'll be the end of this episode. Don't forget to join me next week as I bring you the final episode of Wrestling in 1990 and the rest. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.